And it's one of the gun cases, and it was whether or not you could go after someone who you discovered was a habitual drug user, in this case marijuana, and that disqualify them from owning or possessing a gun. The court has got a unanimous opinion. Essentially, there are all kinds of factions and concurrences, but nobody's dissenting here, saying that the prosecution of this individual or going after this individual based on his drug usage and gun ownership violates the Second Amendment. Now, it may be very fact specific to this particular case, but that is the first of the gun cases. There's another one we're waiting on as well. So we may often the court will pair up decisions. So we may get the other gun case we're dealing with, which has to deal with concealed carry, specifically in Hawaii. But we're waiting on birthright citizenship. We're waiting on when the count for ballots has to end after Election Day. We're waiting on trans sports and whether you can say that biologically born males can't be in girls' sports at the collegiate and high school level. So those opinions are still coming in right now. But that first gun case is the one, and it's on our watch list. So 19 cases to go, guys.
19 cases to go from Shannon Bream there in Fox News, a great resource for all things Supreme Court. And we have our expert here, Hans von Spakovsky, to break down this ruling regarding this gun law. And it was, as I understand it, Hans, this gun law was used to prosecute Hunter Biden. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, in part, but that was a very different situation. Remember, Hunter Biden was a cocaine addict. Okay, I mean, at one point, I think he talked about, admitted he was using cocaine every 20 minutes, and clearly it was causing all kinds of problems that potentially made him dangerous. That wasn't the situation here. Mr. Hamani, actually, it's kind of interesting. He was suspected of supposed terrorist activities by the government. He's a dual citizen, U.S. and Pakistani. And so the government actually went in and searched his home, but apparently he was very friendly, cooperative, said, well, I also own a gun. Oh, and I have some marijuana plants. And they didn't find anything. They didn't find anything to support their suspicion. 6 months later, they charge him. And he just said, well, yeah, every couple of days I smoke some marijuana. And what the Supreme Court said was that this law, the language is an unlawful user of a controlled substance. It's really intended to apply to addicts who, because of the drug use, it makes them potentially dangerous. There's no such evidence here. Plus, I can tell you, Annie, you know when they lost the case? They lost the case when, in the oral arguments, Amy Coney Barrett asked the government, she said, listen, if I occasionally have trouble sleeping and I use my husband's Ambien prescription, can you prosecute me under this law? And the government said yes.
Ooh, that's a little bit extreme.
I think, and you know, it was interesting. Alito, something very unusual. Alito and Kagan wrote a concurrence together, and what they said was that, look, marijuana use today is just like alcohol use at the founding of the country, and so historically they didn't see a reason to violate the Second Amendment when it comes to this. But they were very careful to say that the other provisions of this law, for example, preventing a felon from owning a gun, that's still in place.
Hans von Spakovsky with us right now, Advancing American Freedom Senior Legal Fellow, former FEC Commissioner and DOJ lawyer. So, Hans, it seems like what you're saying here and what Shannon Bream was saying is very narrow ruling that comes out of this particular case. But she mentioned 19 more cases to go. What can you tell us about, of course, what you know, and there's certainly a lot that is maybe inferred or we just don't know. 19 cases left, and my understanding is by the end of June, we'll know the results of those 19 cases.
Well, she says 19. I actually counted 22, but I think she's counting the fact that several of the cases are combined into one. For example, there's a case out of West Virginia and Idaho over state laws that ban biological males from participating in women's sports. So she's probably counting that as one case. Well, look, Normally, the court ends at the end of June. What's a week and a half to the end of June. And frankly, everybody was, I think, surprised today when they released only 3 decisions. And while this gun case is important, it is not any of the other major cases. I mean, I actually have a list here of them. And we've got the women's sports one, the temporary protected status of aliens case, the coordinated expenditures by the political parties for their candidates, birthright citizenship, whether the president can fire the heads of multi-agencies, the counting absentee ballots after Election Day, a gun case out of Hawaii involving concealed carry. Those are all big cases still there. By the way, one case nobody ever mentions, but I think is important to homeowners all over the country, is there's actually a case there about whether if you don't pay your property taxes and the county government comes in and seizes your property and sells it in order to pay the tax lien, can the county government keep all of the other money? Or do they have to give you the difference between what they sold it for and your tax lien? That's a very big deal. You know, if your house is worth $100,000 and the county sells your home because to pay a $10,000 tax bill, this county is saying, well, we ought to be able to keep the entire $100,000. That's a big case for homeowners across the country.
What state did that one come out of? Do you know off the top of your head? Because I'm thinking right now, I've looked at my property taxes in the state of Illinois, and they've gone up 40% since we have purchased our home, which is crazy. Right. And I know that there are a lot of people in states like Illinois where property taxes are incredibly high, where it's a huge factor in wanting to leave. And if you don't pay them, and the state of Illinois can get their grubby hands on it, that's like right up our alley. I don't like the thoughts of that.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I should know the county, but all I know is it's Isabella County, wherever that is.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of these different cases, the big ones, certainly, and there are quite a few of them that you're anticipating, Hans. The birthright citizenship one, I think that I'm silly for doing this, but I always look at these rulings like it's going to be an either or. But as you just articulated with the gun ruling today, that they can be narrow, they can be broad. Talk to us about, with the birthright citizenship ruling that we're waiting on from the Supreme Court, what's the spectrum of results that we could get back?
Look, I'm hopeful in that case, but I'm a little bit pessimistic. Look, the issue is, if you are simply born in the United States, are you a citizen regardless of who your parents are? It's possible the court could come up with, as you say, kind of a split decision. You know, perhaps they come out and say, well, if your parents are in the U.S. as aliens legally, then yeah, if you're born here, you're a citizen. But if they're in the United States illegally, you're not a citizen. Look, I think the Citizenship Clause in the 14th Amendment says at least one of your parents has to be a U.S. citizen for you to be a U.S. citizen when you're born. But I don't know if they'll come up with that. That's a difficult case to predict how they're going to come out.
And then we've got a few others. I think that the bathroom, it's males participating in women's athletics. What's the possible outcome there?
The laws basically say if you're a biological male, you cannot participate in women's athletics in colleges, schools, etc. I think the challengers in that case will lose. I think the states will win. I think the Supreme Court will uphold those laws. And I say that based on some prior decisions they have made, like last year, remember, they upheld a law in Tennessee that banned basically surgical mutilation and giving drugs to minors in order to basically try to change their gender appearance.
I remember, I think it was this case when at the hearing when they broadcast this, that they did kind of go in circles a little bit about talking about men participating in women's athletics, or males and females, whatever.
Right.
And my recollection was that the justices were pushing back a little bit on how do you even define what one is versus the other, and if it's incredibly arbitrary. I mean, it's hard to say, even without definitions, where it's just kind of this idyllic, socially virtuistic from the left concept that gender is a fluid type of a situation.
Right.
That
Right.
How do you interpret what can or can't be done when we couldn't even get to the actual definitions? We couldn't get from the people who were trying to defend the current status of what's going on by saying this is a man and this is a woman.
Yeah, no, that in fact was the subject of the oral arguments a lot. Let me tell you something else that actually interesting happened in that case. The lawyer for the challengers in that case argued to the court that, there's no physical differences between men and women. This idea that men are always going to come out ahead in sports just isn't true. Well, just a couple of weeks ago, the West Virginia Attorney General sent a letter to the Supreme Court. This was after oral arguments had occurred, pointing that, in fact, the plaintiff who had challenged the West Virginia law was winning all these statewide contests in women's athletics in the state of West Virginia.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's so... I mean, there's just such a will from the left. Actually, it's not a will. It's a force-fed virtue signaling on this particular issue. They just dare you to challenge it. And this Supreme Court case is the penultimate challenge to the idea that they can just say something and scare everybody into trying to push back on it. It's great to see that it's happening. Well, we will watch as these... Is it possible that they could come out tomorrow? Are they off tomorrow for Juneteenth?
They are not. They've not scheduled a release date for tomorrow, and we probably will find out tomorrow what days next week they will release their opinions.
Well, we'll be staying tuned to that, and we will be in connection with you, Hans, the second we hear about some more of these big, big pending rulings from the Supreme Court. Hans von Spakovsky, thank you. It's good to have you with us again.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Have a good weekend. Hans von Spakovsky, Advancing American Freedom, Senior Legal Fellow, former FEC Commissioner, and former DOJ lawyer.